Welcome back, Year 3. Good to see you again. We are back here for another day of home learning. Not long to go now, so we're into very much the final stretch of home learning. So I hope you're still feeling positive, still feeling good, and you're excited about coming back. While we are still learning from home, we're going to be continuing with our character description unit of literacy. So this is where we are learning how we can describe a character really effectively. So whenever we are writing to entertain, whenever we're writing a story or a narrative, there's always going to be some sort of character. And in order for us to do a really good job of that, we're going to need to paint a picture of that character in our reader's mind. And yesterday you began that unit with your cold task, which is where you kind of have a go at that and try to remember all the things you've already learned on that, which is useful. Today, I would like, after a cold task, to start looking at a really good example. And I always think, what better way of doing it than actually look at how the professionals do it? So actually look at some really good authors and look at how they do the thing that we are trying to learn. So in this case, we're trying to learn how to describe a character. So we're going to look at how some good authors have described the characters in their books. Now, what techniques do you think those authors are going to use then? Have a bit of a conversation about that at home. What techniques do you think we're going to see today? Okay, hopefully you've paused there and had a quick conversation about that. I wonder how many of you mentioned these things. These were things that we talked about yesterday. So, Mr. Bass from school was telling you that, yes, we're going to try to put in some adjectives, adverbs, similes, vocabulary choices. I told you as a teacher that we were going to try to do all of these things in our work. I wonder how many we're going to see in these professional versions. Do authors use these? I hope so. Hopefully we're going to see all of these different things in these professional examples today. So I'm going to show you some extracts from some books, and what I'd like you to do along the way is I'd like you to pause after I've finished speaking about each one, and have that conversation at home. Have the conversation and say, well, can you spot any adjectives? Can you find any examples of similes? Can you see where an author might have described not just what you can see, but maybe what they could hear or smell as well? Have they put in any fronted adverbials? See if you can spot any great vocabulary choices. We're going to try to identify these features which we've learnt about and see if they appear in professional printed books. So I'm just going to give you some short extracts. These are maybe a kind of half a page or so from some books. So we're going to start off. You can't talk about great authors and famous authors without talking about J.K. Rowling, really, can you? This was the author of Harry Potter. I'm sure many of you have read the books. I know lots of you will have read the films, have watched the films. Let's read a description of a character from the first book. So I'm going to read it first of all, and I'd like you to pause it and see if you can spot and talk about some of these features and see if you can identify them. So here we go. He was a big, beefy man with hardly any neck, although he did have a very large moustache. Mrs. Dursley was thin and blonde and had nearly twice the usual amount of neck, which came in very useful as she spent so much of her time craning over garden fences, spying on the neighbours. A giant of a man was standing in the doorway. His face was almost completely hidden by a long, shaggy mane of hair and a wild, tangled beard, but you could make out his eyes glinting like black beetles under all the hair. Okay, super description there of the character Hagrid, which you can see on the cover there. Can you please pause the video here and have a conversation about these things? Can you spot these different features? So pause here and come back when you're done. Okay, so I'll try and identify a few of these things. You might have some of the same answers as me. You might have talked about something completely different. That's fine. And I certainly won't talk about everything you can see here. I would say one thing where there's loads of in this example is adjectives. There are so many describing words. Things like big, beefy, large, thin, blonde. This piece is absolutely littered with adjectives. And that just goes to show, doesn't it, that these are really important describing words. We know that adjectives describe nouns, and look how many we can pick out. I'll probably miss some as well. There are absolutely loads here that we could be talking about. So loads and loads of adjectives. That's a really good start. One thing which really stood out to me in this piece of writing was the fantastic simile. I really like the simile. Did you spot it as well? It talked about his eyes glinting like black beetles under all the hair. I think that's a fantastic description, isn't it? She could have just said his eyes were black, but she said his eyes glinted like black beetles. So glinted is probably also something we can have here for a great vocabulary choice. Glinted means it kind of shines or glimmered. So these things were shining like black beetles. So great examples there. There's loads more I could pick out. I'm going to move on to our next piece for now. I'm sure you had some of your own for that as well. So here is an author I'm guessing some of you won't have heard of, not many of you will have heard of, called Louis Sacre. I wonder though if some of the mums and dads at home are kind of nodding to this, because I've got a feeling this is a kind of GCSE book. I think lots of parents, I'm sure, will have read this at high school, maybe some nodding mums and dads at home. So let's read this one, a fantastic description here of some of the characters. They were dripping with sweat, and their faces were so dirty that it took Stanley a moment to notice that one kid was white and the other black. Madame Zeroni had dark skin and a very wide mouth. When she looked at you, her eyes seemed to expand, and you felt like she was looking right through you. Okay, so another really nice description there. Can you, once again, pause the video and talk about these features, but also talk about which sentences do you really like? Which were the ones that really made you think, or made you think, yeah, I can really picture that. So talk about this extract. What do you like about it? Which features can you see? And come back when you are done. Okay, so the first thing that stood out to me in this example, I think there's a super fronted adverbial here. We've got this. When she looked at you, her eyes seemed to expand and you felt like she was looking right through you. So when she looked at you, her eyes seemed to widen or get bigger. I really like that fronted adverbial there, when she looked at you. I really like as well, I would call this perhaps a sort of simile we've got at the end here. It says, it felt like, so it didn't actually, it wasn't this, but it felt like it. So it's a kind of simile. It felt like she was looking right through you, so that she was staring so intently and so directly that she was staring right through you. I didn't mention the great vocabulary choices in the last day. Anyway, okay. I think there's one sentence in this one that I really love, and it doesn't necessarily fit so neatly into what we've got here, but I just really, really love it. And it's this. They were dripping with sweat. Now, it could have just said, couldn't it? They're sweaty. And that would have been fine. That would have been an okay description. That would have been a good adjective. We could have just had, they were sweaty. But I really love the way Louis Sacre actually described it instead as they were dripping with sweat. And I think that just really kind of, I think if I just read they were sweaty, okay, that's fine. But when it says they were dripping with sweat, I think it really exaggerates it, and it makes it, I can really sort of picture that horrible sort of liquidy sweat dripping off their faces. And I think that really brought it to life for me. So, I mean, maybe we could call that some great vocabulary choices, because certainly I love the choice of words there. I think more pertinently, that's just a really vivid bit of description. We could, again, maybe sort of file that under talking about the five senses, that it's not just what we could see, but almost the kind of feel of it as well. I think I really like that sentence. They were dripping with sweat. So some really, really nice stuff. There are a couple of nice adjectives there. We've got dark and wide, but I think there's so many nice elements to that. Okay. Now, if you haven't heard of Louis Sacre, here's an author you definitely will have heard of, which is David Walliams. In fact, I think we've watched this as a class, maybe one privileged time, The Midnight Gang. I think we might have seen the TV adaptation to that at some point together. But certainly it's a wonderful book, so a really, really great kids book. So this is a description from David Walliams from that book of one of the characters in it. A large older lady in a blue and white uniform leaned over and examined the boy's head. Dark circles framed her bloodshot eyes. Grey, wiry hair squatted on her head. Her face was red raw, as if she had scrubbed it with a cheese grater. In brief, she had the appearance of someone who had not slept for a week and was angry about it. I love that. What a great, great paragraph of description. So same again, can you please pause the video here, have a really good conversation or think at home about what makes this successful. I love this piece, but let's actually try to unpick it. What is it about it that's so good? Can you find for me maybe your favorite word choices? Can you talk about your favorite sentences and why? Can you pick out some of these features that David Walliams has included? So pause here and come back when you are ready. Okay, absolutely loads to pick out in this one, isn't there? So we can, yes, there's a little front adverbial, though that's really just a sort of a small part there. There is in brief, that's a nice front adverbial. I'd say there's so much more than that, though. I particularly love all the brilliant vocabulary choices in here. So I'm going to really make a point of picking some of these out. I think David Walliams has thought very carefully about what words he's using. I like things like, where is it? Squatted. Squatted means you're kind of down on your haunches, you kind of kneel down. And I think I love that idea of the grey wiry hair squatting on top of her head. I really like that use of the word squatting there. I also really like scrubbed. Her face was red raw as if she had scrubbed it with a cheese grater. So not just kind of, you know, rubbed it, but scrubbed, as though I think scrub is like a really it's almost like a more powerful version of rub. If you're scrubbing something, you're doing it really vigorously. So I really like the use of scrubbed there. I liked examined. Didn't just look at the boy's head, she examined it, and that's like a really, really close, intense checking. So again, really, really like that. There's some great vocabulary in there. I really like that David Walliams didn't just say, I leaned over and looked at the boy's head. He picked examined for a really good bit of vocabulary. There are some lovely similes in here. Let's pick them out. So we've got, her face was red raw as if she had scrubbed it with a cheese grater. We're not saying that is the reason that her face is red. It's just, it's like she had done that. So that's a really nice one. Some really, really fantastic stuff here. I suppose in many ways, this is a bit of a simile as well, isn't it? She had the appearance of someone who had not slept for a week and was angry about it. I think there's some really, really powerful stuff here. I think what makes this really effective, and I'm going to pick out again that sort of sentence at the end, this one. She had, oh, sorry, new colour. She had the appearance of someone who had not slept for a week. Now, it doesn't necessarily fit into one of our kind of categories, but again, I think that is such a vivid description. I can immediately imagine someone there who hasn't slept for ages. We all kind of can picture what that looks like, can't we? We can picture someone with maybe their eyes, maybe sort of bags under their eyes, maybe they're looking a bit cross, maybe they've got sort of a furrowed brow and they've got some sort of wrinkles forming. And I just love the way that it makes it so easy for us to picture. And I think really, whenever you're describing a character, that's what you're trying to do. You are trying to help your reader to picture it. David Walliams could have just said, a lady came in. But it's hard to actually picture that, isn't it? It's really hard to imagine just a lady. I mean, we can easily picture a lady, but we've no idea what kind of lady. Whereas with this, I've got such a clear picture in my mind of what this character looks like. I know she's going to be really stern looking. I know she's going to have a red face and she's going to have this horrible wiry grey hair. I know that she's going to look really cross and frustrated. And so in my head, I can really easily picture it. And so I would say this is definitely something else that we can pick up from these authors. They're all doing a really fantastic job of painting that picture in our head. Yesterday, we started with the picture and I asked you to do the writing. I think a really good piece of writing does the opposite. If you've got a really good piece of writing, it will actually create the picture for you. And I think that's definitely what has happened here. So fantastic. I think we've definitely seen lots of these features, haven't we? What I'd like you to do now is I'd like you to, if you've got some books at home, have a look through some of your books and try to find somewhere where there's great examples of a character description. So if you've got a book that you really love reading, if you've got maybe a Ruby Redford, or if you've got Horrid Henry, if you've got some books at home that you love, pick one out, a fiction book is going to need to be, and try to find a place where a new character is introduced. Now, some good places for that. Often, very early on in the story, page 1, page 2, you might get a main character being described. If it's a chapter book, very often chapters will either have like a new character at the start of them, and often it's really usefully named. So the chapter might be that character's name, and it'll be the first time they're introduced. So if you can, try to find a place in some books at home where you've got a new character introduced, and have a look at it. Have a look at it with fresh eyes, looking like we have in this lesson for what is it that makes it successful. Are there any words or phrases that you really love? Are there any sentences which really help you to picture what that character looks like? Are there any sentences where you can see some great vocabulary choices or some adjectives? Try to find today some really brilliant description in your books at home. And if you can do as well, why not send me a picture? If I get any good ones, I would love to include these in tomorrow's video. I can put those at the start. We can include some of the great description that you found in your own books at home. This is what we're going to do in class tomorrow. We're going to look through some of our class library books, and we're going to try to find some great examples of character description. So let's see if you can find some at home as well. If you do, send me a picture. You don't need to necessarily even write anything with it. You can just snap a picture and get mum or dad to email it off to me, and we'll try to include some of those tomorrow. If you want to write a little sentence about why you think it's so brilliant, even better. Okay, thanks everyone. Hope you enjoy that, and hope you find some excellent character description in your books at home. And I will see you back for our maths session after this.